The laughter hit me before I even stepped out of the taxi. It cut through the crisp autumn air, sharp and mocking. My mother's voice, loud, theatrical, dripping with superiority. "Oh my God, Rebecca actually came in a taxi?" The country club terrace erupted in laughter, the kind that makes your chest cave in on itself. I'd been sitting in that taxi for 2 full minutes, watching them through the windshield. My fiancé Daniel stood beside my cousin Mason, champagne already loosening their ties. Daniel's hand was on Mason's shoulder, too comfortably, too long. My stomach twisted. The autumn sun caught the golden strands of their hair, lighting them like some kind of false angels. I forced a small smile, gripping my clutch tighter. The driver offered an apologetic nod before driving off, leaving me standing in front of the Hawthorne Country Club, the same place where they'd announced my engagement 3 months ago, where they'd made toasts and promises and painted a picture of a life that had already crumbled behind closed doors. Long ride. Mason sneered, descending the marble steps with his fiancée, Heather, clinging to his arm like an accessory. His eyes raked over my simple blue dress. "Or did your little car break down again?" Heather giggled, that hollow, practiced sound. "She's always been so practical, hasn't she?" I wanted to speak, to say something witty or cold, but the lump in my throat burned. I just walked past them, hearing my mother whisper to my Aunt Lorna, "She still dresses like she shops from the clearance bin." And Daniel didn't defend me. Not once. My name is Rebecca Turner, and that was the moment I realized I didn't have a life. I had an audience. Daniel and I had been engaged for 2 years. We met in college, back when he said my quiet nature calmed him. Now he said it bored him. My mother had orchestrated our entire engagement like a wedding planner orchestrates centerpieces, with precision and zero regard for authenticity. Our small town thrived on image. My mother, Eleanor Turner, was the architect of that image for everyone else. She knew how to perform: the perfect smile, the tailored dresses, the laugh that made men lean in closer. I'd spent 28 years watching her master the art of control disguised as love. I'd been avoiding this gala for weeks, but my mother insisted. "You're being dramatic, Rebecca. Daniel misses you. The whole family is expecting us to celebrate your engagement properly." But as I stepped into the grand ballroom and saw the pitying eyes, the forced smiles, and Daniel's hand slide easily around Mason's waist, I knew exactly why he'd pushed so hard for my attendance. It wasn't love. It was control. It was an audience to witness my humiliation. Dinner was torture wrapped in linen napkins and served on bone china. My mother sat at the head of the table, naturally, her pearls catching the chandelier light. She raised her glass. "To family," she said sweetly, locking eyes with Daniel, "and to knowing who truly belongs." The words hit like a physical blow. Gasps rippled around the table. Daniel smirked into his wine, and my world tilted. I felt small, invisible, like I was fading from the picture while they painted a version of my life without me in it. "Rebecca!" Aunt Lorna chimed in, my mother's sister, always the second voice in a harmony of cruelty. "I heard you're still teaching part-time at the community center. Must be so peaceful." There was a pause. Everyone waited for the punchline. I nodded, forcing my voice steady. I like the quiet." My sister Lily, 5 years younger, 5 times more ruthless, giggled. "Of course you do. Some people just aren't built for ambition." The table erupted in laughter. Daniel laughed the loudest. My hands trembled under the table. I gripped my napkin so tight the fabric tore. That was the night I stopped believing family was sacred. When we got home, I confronted him. Our apartment was small, modest. Everything Daniel had said he wanted until my mother convinced him it was beneath us. Now he treated it like a prison. "Do you enjoy making me feel small?" I asked quietly. Daniel poured himself whiskey, acting bored. "Oh, come on, Beck. You take everything so seriously. You stood there while she mocked me. You laughed. He took a slow sip, eyes cold. Maybe if you didn't make it so easy, people wouldn't. I froze. What does that mean? It means you're stuck, Rebecca. Same job, same friends, same dull clothes. You're like wallpaper, always there, but no one really sees you. The room spun. He looked at me like I was an inconvenience, not a fiancé. I whispered, I thought you loved me. He shrugged. I did. Once. I slept on the couch that night. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, my chest so tight I thought I might break in half. Days turned into weeks of suffocating silence. Daniel withdrew completely. Late nights, vague excuses, new cologne. He started locking his phone. The first time I caught a text from E with a heart emoji, I told myself it was just Evelyn, Mason's ex. She'd always been flirty. But when he came home smelling like Chanel No. 5, the exact fragrance my mother wore, denial wasn't enough. I asked him. He smiled that cruel little smirk and said, You're imagining things. You always do. Gaslighting. That was his weapon of choice. He twisted every truth until I doubted my own sanity. And I fell for it every single time. The gossip started small. At the diner where I sometimes graded papers, Mrs. Hill leaned across the counter and whispered, You hear about Daniel and your mother? Poor Rebecca. At the grocery store, whispers followed me down every aisle. By the time I walked into church on Sunday, people were already pretending not to stare. I went home early that day, shut the curtains, and cried until my eyes ached. That night, Daniel came home smelling of champagne. They're all talking, I said quietly. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, Maybe if you were more interesting, they'd have something nicer to say. That was the night I realized he wasn't just betraying me. He was enjoying my humiliation. 2 weeks later, I came home early from work. The house was too quiet. Daniel's jacket was on the chair. My mother's perfume hung heavy in the air. I walked to the bedroom door, half open. There they were. My mother's laugh was low, intimate. Daniel's voice, soft, the way he used to speak to me. My world shattered in one heartbeat. I stood frozen, watching the two people I'd trusted most tear apart the last of my dignity. My mother turned, startled. Rebecca! I backed away, numb. My hand found the wall, needing something solid to hold onto as my knees buckled. Daniel shouted, Don't make this a scene. A scene. That's what my life ending was to him. An inconvenience. I left without a word. Just my car keys and the sound of my heart breaking behind me. Divorce papers came a week later from his lawyer. He didn't even have the courage to face me. My mother never called. Not once. She simply rewrote the narrative. Daniel was the victim of my emotional instability. I was too intense, too needy, too much. My sister, Lily, stopped answering my texts. My Aunt Lorna told me I'd brought this on myself by not being a better fiancé. I started renting a small room above a florist shop on the edge of town. It smelled like roses and loneliness. Every night, I'd hear laughter echoing from the bar down the street. Couples, friends, people living while I just existed. But something inside me refused to break completely. Something small and stubborn whispered, Not like this. One evening, I ran into an old college friend at the library where I'd taken to hiding. Dr. Harris Whitford. I'd always called him Harris back then. He was older now, successful, a venture capitalist who'd returned to our small town to invest in local initiatives. He'd also been kind to me when kindness was scarce. He looked surprised when he saw me curled in the corner with a stack of books on business, finance, and legacy properties. Rebecca? Wow, it's been years. I laughed bitterly. Rough years. We had coffee the next morning. I told him everything. The affair, the humiliation, the way they broke me piece by piece. He listened quietly, no pity in his eyes, just understanding. When I finished, he said something that shifted everything. You don't have to fight them with anger, Rebecca. Fight them with success. Make them wish they'd never underestimated you. His words lit something in me, a quiet, controlled fire. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to survive this. I was going to win. I spent weeks in that library mapping out a plan. My grandmother had owned a beautiful flower shop once, the Willow House. My mother had sold it years ago to one of her friends for a fraction of its worth. A betrayal I'd watched but never fully understood until now. Harris helped me quietly acquire it through an intermediary. The building smelled of dust and old lilacs when I first stepped inside. The wooden counter was scarred, the windows cloudy with neglect. But under the layers of decay, I could still see the bones of what it once was. Beauty, legacy, belonging. That night, I lit a single candle in the middle of the empty shop. Its light flickered across the cracked tiles like a heartbeat. I whispered, "You buried me in the soil of this town. Now I'll grow roots so deep you'll choke on them." It wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. I reopened the Willow House 6 months later. It wasn't just a flower shop. It was a sanctuary. I designed every corner, like therapy. Sunlight through lace curtains, lavender-scented candles. A corner bookshelf filled with stories about women who rebuilt themselves from ashes. A small cafe where people could sit and breathe. People came for flowers and stayed for coffee. They left with something else, quiet awe. Harris consulted on the business side. He taught me about property law, investment strategies, and how to build something that would last. Between his guidance and my obsessive attention to detail, the Willow House became more than a shop. It became a movement. I began hosting small gatherings, book clubs, fundraisers, charity nights, the kind my mother used to dominate. Only now, her invitations weren't needed. Mine were the ones people waited for. Lily's Boutique, Lily's Luxe, had always been the pride of Main Street. She'd been cruel, vicious even, during my lowest moments. She'd whispered to friends about my failure. She'd made sure everyone knew that Daniel had left me for my mother. Through Harris, I discovered something interesting. Lily's silent business partner was under federal investigation for tax evasion and fraud. Quietly, I acquired the adjacent property, the one her boutique shared a parking lot with. I hired a local contractor and began renovations. Every day, she had to watch my construction crew hammer, drill, and paint. Every evening, I updated the project sign with a beautiful rendering of the Willow House expansion. She came storming over one morning in her designer heels, eyes blazing. "What are you doing, Rebecca? You're ruining my storefront." I smiled, calm as ever, just rebuilding something my grandmother left behind. Her jaw tightened. "You think you can just open up a dead business next to mine?" I met her glare. "No, Lily, I don't think. I know." For the first time, she couldn't find words sharp enough to wound me. And God felt good. My mother called one October afternoon, her voice dripping with that syrupy tone that used to make me crumble. "Rebecca, sweetheart," she cooed. "You've been so busy, I hear. I'm proud of you. You always were talented, even if you were difficult." I let her talk about how Lily's business was struggling, how Daniel had quit his job, how she missed the closeness we used to have. Each word was another matchstick in the pyre she didn't know she was building. I listened. I smiled. I took notes. Because every manipulator has a weakness. They can't stop talking. They reveal themselves while trying to rewrite history. That night, I gave Harris everything I had on Lily's partner, the documentation, the proof of fraud, the embezzlement records. He handed it to the town's newspaper editor. The story broke on a Sunday morning. By autumn, the town had transformed. The Hawthorne family's reputation, carefully cultivated over decades, crumbled in 72 hours. Mason had been caught in the fraud. My mother's affair with Daniel was now public knowledge, fodder for every coffee shop and church pew in town. Lily's business failed within weeks when people realized she'd been complicit in her partner's schemes. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd taught me everything about manipulation and deception. I'd simply been a better student. The invitation came thick cream paper with gold lettering. The Turner Family Charity Gala. My mother had written in her looping handwriting, "We'd love to have you, Rebecca. It's time to let bygones be bygones." I stared at it for a long time. Then, with a small smile, I placed it on my desk beside the ledger I'd been keeping. They wanted me there. Perfect. Because by then, I wasn't coming as the abandoned daughter. I was coming as the storm they created. The morning of the gala, I stood in front of my mirror for a long moment. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, not in an unsettling way, in a way that felt like coming home. My silver dress was sleek, understated. My hair fell in soft waves. My makeup was impeccable, but it wasn't the exterior that had changed. It was something deeper. The girl who'd begged for scraps of love was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd learned to build kingdoms from ashes. Harris picked me up at 7. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo, and when he looked at me, there was admiration in his eyes, but also something else. Respect. Partnership. The kind of connection built on shared vision, not shared delusion. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. I took it, breathing slowly. "No," I whispered. "I'm right on time." The night air shimmered with fairy lights strung between oak trees as we stepped out of the town car. My heart thudded slow and steady, like a drumbeat before a storm. Laughter rippled from the terrace. The Hawthorne family and their carefully curated circle of wealth and influence. The driver opened my door, and I adjusted my silver dress. My reflection in the glass looked calm, but inside I was burning with quiet electricity. Then came the sound that silenced everything, a high, mocking laugh I knew too well. Mason descended the marble steps, champagne already in hand, his fiancée, a new one, clinging to his arm. He looked exactly the same, arrogant, entitled, untouchable. "Well, well," he sneered. "You actually came, Rebecca. And by town car? Couldn't borrow a ride from one of your little book club friends." His friends chuckled, their eyes scanning me like I was an exhibit at a museum. I didn't flinch. Not this time. Then Harris stepped out beside me, straightening his cufflinks with deliberate calm. The air shifted. The conversation died. Mason's smirk faltered. "You're with him." Harris looked straight at him, his voice smooth as silk. "Actually, I'm with my business partner. Rebecca and I co-founded Whitford and Hayes Development. You must be Mason, the one who lost your last 2 bids to us? The fraud investigation must be keeping you busy." Silence fell, slicing the night in half. I could feel dozens of eyes turning toward us, the same eyes that used to look through me. My Aunt Lorna froze mid-conversation, her wineglass trembling slightly. She'd spread every rumor that had buried me alive. "Rebecca Hayes," she stammered. "But you left town. You weren't supposed to come back?" I finished softly, stepping toward her. "I know, Aunt Lorna. That was the plan, wasn't it? That I'd disappear quietly and let you all rewrite the story." She opened her mouth, but I continued, my voice gentle but edged with steel. "Let me help you with the narrative. Rebecca Turner was too weak to hold onto her fiancé, too boring, too much of a failure. So she ran away and we all moved on, didn't we?" Lorna's face was pale now. "Except I didn't run away," I said. "I rebuilt. I learned. And I came back." Harris placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Rebecca runs most of the community contracts we've taken from the Hawthorne firm. She's brilliant. Turns out, quiet people often are. They listen instead of talking. They learn instead of performing." My mother appeared in the ballroom doorway, her face draining of color when she saw me. For the first time in my life, I watched her realize she had no power over me. An hour later, the party was a battlefield disguised in silk. A reporter I'd tipped off earlier was asking Mason pointed questions about missing funds and falsified contracts. Cameras flashed. His carefully constructed world crumbled in real time. My mother tried to approach, trembling now. Her voice had lost its honeyed sweetness. "Rebecca, listen to me. You can't just destroy your own family like this." I turned to her slowly, the soft light catching my profile. "You destroyed me first. You made me beg for scraps of love and called it loyalty. You watched them humiliate me. And then you became the very thing you taught me to fear. A woman so desperate to control the narrative that she'd betray anyone, even her daughter." She looked desperate now, mascara trembling at her lashes. "Please, if you have any decency." "Decency?" I whispered. "I learned that too late, Mother. I learned it while cleaning up the messes you left behind, while watching my fiancé betray me, while being erased from a family I was born into." Behind her, Mason was shouting into his phone, the facade cracking, reporters closing in, the perfect golden boy reduced to red-faced panic. Lily stood frozen near the bar, her phone pressed to her ear as her lawyer delivered news about the fraud charges. Her pristine facade was shattered, makeup running, dress suddenly looking like a costume instead of armor. And my mother, Eleanor Turner, the architect of lies, looked small for the first time in her life. I watched her crumble, and I felt nothing but release. The morning after the gala, the whole town felt different. Small towns always do after a scandal. The air changes. The silence has an echo. You can almost hear the gossip crawling through coffee shops and post offices. I sat by the window of the diner where I used to shrink inside myself, watching people whisper about my humiliation. Now, every whisper paused when they saw me, replaced by cautious smiles and shaky nods. Across the street, the Hawthorne Law Office stood with its blinds drawn. Mason's nameplate had been removed from the door. The newspaper headline, still visible in the street box, read, "Local family firm under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Multiple charges filed." Every name that had mocked mine was printed beneath it. I should have felt victorious, but what I really felt was release. It wasn't about destroying them anymore. It was about ending the version of me that needed their approval. The doorbell chimed. Harris slid into the booth with 2 plates of pancakes, my favorite breakfast. He set them down carefully and studied my face. "You look different," he said softly. "I am," I whispered. "For the first time, I think I finally am." He reached across the table and took my hand. "What you did, it wasn't just revenge, Rebecca. You chose yourself. You rebuilt yourself. That's far more powerful than destroying them." I squeezed his hand, realizing he was right. 2 months later, I stood in front of the empty lot where the old warehouse had stood. Harris had helped me acquire it, a piece of property nobody wanted, a blank canvas in the heart of town. Now it would become something beautiful. The sign above the door read, "The Hayes Foundation, a place to begin again." Inside, we'd built a youth center, music rooms, art studios, a library filled with books about resilience and second chances, a kitchen where kids could come after school and know they'd find both nourishment and safety. Because the truth about getting what you want isn't that you keep it all for yourself. It's that you use it to build something that matters. People started coming, some of them the same ones who'd laughed at me. They looked nervous, unsure if they were welcome. I always smiled and let them in, because this new life wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about what comes after revenge. It was about what you become when you choose grace over bitterness. That evening, a familiar car pulled into the parking lot. Mason stepped out. His hair was unkempt, eyes hollow. He looked 10 years older. His designer clothes hung on him like they belonged to someone else. "Rebecca," he said quietly, voice breaking. "I lost everything. The firm, the money, the house, even Heather left me." For a long moment, I said nothing. I just looked at him, really looked. The man who'd fed on my pain was now standing in it himself. "I hope," I said slowly, "you finally understand what it feels like to start from nothing. Maybe then you'll stop laughing at people who do, He opened his mouth to speak, but I turned away, walking toward the center's doors. Children's laughter spilled out. Pure, untainted, the sound of beginnings. I didn't look back. Some victories are too sacred to be shared. The town was quieter, or maybe I was. The gossip had faded, replaced by a kind of reverence people reserve for stories they still don't fully understand. The youth center thrived. Its walls were covered in laughter, drawings, and second chances. I sometimes stayed late just to listen to the hum of it, the sound of healing. One evening, as the sky melted into orange and lavender, Harris and I walked along the lake behind the center. Fireflies blinked above the water, soft and golden. Across the hill, the old Hawthorne mansion stood dark and empty, its windows boarded, ivy curling over stone, a relic of arrogance turned to ruin. Harris took my hand. Do you ever regret it? I thought about that question carefully. Regret destroying them? No. Regret that it had to happen? Yes. He nodded, understanding. We walked in silence for a while, and then I said, the truth about revenge is this. It isn't about making them hurt. It's about finally choosing yourself over the hurt they caused. When the wind shifted, carrying laughter from the center, I turned toward the light, toward everything I'd built, everything they said I never could. And for the first time, I didn't think of what they took. I thought of what I'd become. I thought of the quiet girl who'd arrived in a taxi, small and broken, and I smiled at how loud her silence had become. This is a tale as old as time. The triumph of the quiet one, the power of patient resilience, the victory that comes not from screaming, but from building something better than your pain. My story is about understanding that the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be. Some women make noise when they rise. I made history. If my story resonated with you, share it with someone gaslit into invisibility. Tell them their worth was never in question, only waiting to be remembered. Tell them the girl in the taxi became the woman who built a foundation. The revolution happens quietly when you decide to stop performing for their approval and start building your own empire. Patience is power. Boundaries are survival. And your story doesn't end with their narrative. Subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories about reclaiming your power, setting boundaries, and turning humiliation into triumph. Because the world needs to know you were always enough. You just forgot, and that forgetting nearly cost you everything. But remembering will cost them everything they thought they had. Your ending is yours to write,